Hello, everybody. I'm Aida with Chad's Coalition.
I'm Mindy with Chad's Coalition.
And I'm Joellen from Chad's Coalition.
So before we throw it to Joellen, if you've not been on one of our All-In Conversations before, we just want to tell you a little bit about Chad's. The Chad's organization has different branches, and Aida and I work for the what we call SOS team, Signs of Suicide. We go into schools and do presentations on suicide awareness and prevention and mental health in schools all over the place, St. Louis County, Jefferson County, St. Charles County, Franklin County. We also have a division that's called our SEW team, SEW, Social and Emotional Wellbeing, where we offer mentoring, one-on-one mentoring to students. It's not therapeutic, it's more social emotional learning. And then Joellen is in our third division, our Family Support division, and she's going to talk a little bit about her role and what happens there.
Yeah. Hi guys. So I am a school-based clinician. I have actually also worked in the office too. I want to just talk a little bit about the program. So the program is we work with adolescents, 20 and children, 25 and under, with who are struggling with symptoms of anxiety, depression, and as well as suicidal ideation. It's targeted in short term, so it's not long-term counseling, unfortunately. But we do work on with the clients with their goals, helping them develop skills, as well as just helping them find like hope for the future, and finding those positivities. I do want to let you know that there are LPCs and PLPCs. What that means is LPC is a licensed professional counselor, and a PLPC is a professional licensed professional counselor. And then there's also social workers that are family support clinicians. The services that we provide is we are in the schools, also as well as the office. We also do high school depression and anxiety groups if, for example, a school would need that or want that, as well as we also do adult survivors and suicide support groups. I think that's about it for kind of what we work with.
Do you want to talk about how kids get referred to your program?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's a good one. So how our students get referred is there's different options. The main one, especially in the schools, is through just our point of contacts or school counselors in the school, as well as parents, if they've heard of Chad's, they as well can refer the kiddos too for the program. And then in the office, it's a little bit different. It's usually parents who are calling the office and then referring for services. And then the services, I do want to kind of talk about like the fee. So in school, it's completely free. The fee agreement is waived, but in the office, we are on a sliding scale basis too. I think that's important to know.
And so the parents know if you come to one of their schools, how can a parent work with the counselor to get their kid referred?
Okay, so that would be the parent would have to contact the school counselor or the point of contact. That could be also a social worker at the school as well, to ask to get their kid in the program. The program, we usually see about 7 to 8 clients at each school. So it's almost every hour as we see a client. So it's a busy day, but definitely rewarding and definitely keeps you on your toes.
Yeah. Awesome. All right.
If you guys could also just let us know in the chat if you are joining us as a school counselor, if you're joining us as a parent, or maybe some other school administrator, whatever. Just kind of type in the chat and let us know so we know who's here too. And also maybe some other things that maybe we might talk about if we have like more school counselors in here versus parents and stuff like that. And if you guys have questions, you can like raise your hands, or you can also type stuff in the chat as well. So you guys just let us know if you have any questions. Today we are going to be talking about okay, can you guys hear me now?
Okay.
Okay, and you guys can see my screen, right? Give me a thumbs up if you can see it. Okay, so we're going to be talking about supporting your child through crisis. So again, if you guys have any questions, just let us know in the chat.
People from CASA. Awesome. Okay, so we're first going to talk a little bit about what is a crisis. How do we define that? So a mental health crisis is when your child is at risk of harming themselves or others, or something that may not be as extreme is if their emotions and behaviors just seem out of control. They're just very extreme. They can't calm themselves. They're just really kind of like very escalated and they can't calm themselves down. Some warning signs of mental health crisis might include suicidal thoughts. They may be talking about it. A lot of times they'll say things that are not direct about wanting to die, but maybe they'll say things like, I just don't think anyone would care if I'm gone anymore.
I don't want to be here.
Yeah, I don't want to be here. I can't do this. Things like that. And when we talk to students about this, we even kind of give some examples of those kinds of things. Definitely making threats to harm others or themselves. Also engaging in self-injurious behaviors such as cutting. And we'll talk a little bit more about self-injury in a little bit. Expressing agitation, aggression, anger, very outwardly angry outbursts that sometimes don't seem to make sense. Maybe they don't relate to what the situation is. Possibly destruction of property. In extreme cases, they could be experiencing hallucinations or delusions. And then another kind of note of mental health crisis is possible isolation from friends and family, not wanting to engage socially. Disappearing from social media could be a sign that they are struggling. So are there things you would like to add?
Yeah, I'd like to add, so sometimes when let's talk about a little bit about self-harm. So when we think of self-harm, we usually go right to cutting, but it can also be different alternatives. Like, for example, a student, pinching themselves or picking at their skin, eating habits where they're not eating at all. Also, like risky behavior, like wanting to jump off of a high building, not really a high building, but like a high, like a bridge or some kind of like quarry, jumping into the water. We never really think about those self-harming alternatives as well. As just, we always kind of go towards cutting. So you also want to kind of look out for that as well.
Can you address for a second, a lot of times, like what we talk about in our presentations with students is that self-injury is not a suicide attempt. Mm-hmm. So can you talk a little bit about how being in a mental health crisis and self-injury kind of can?
Yeah, absolutely. So with like if a client were to report that, saying like, hey, a couple of days ago, I was just really upset or angry at, for example, mom or brother, and I took a razor and I cut myself, and they reported just wanting to feel something. Obviously, the first thing, because we are mandated reporters, we have to let the parents know, as well as either my point of contact or the client's school counselor, if it's in the school setting. If it's in the office setting, it's completely different. It's just the parents. As well as when clients do talk about any like self-injury, I as well as let my supervisor know, just to kind of keep an eye out on that. And then I talk to the parents, have a phone call after the session, letting them know kind of, hey, what I want just to kind of tell you about, like, kind of the concerns that I'm seeing in your child, because they are wanting to hurt themselves, and the parents need to know that. And then we kind of talk about kind of how we can support that, and if a safety plan needs to be in place, which we'll talk a little bit about that later on. Is that kind of answering?
Yeah. Is there any other symptoms that you feel would be good to kind of point out for people to be looking for in terms of a child who is kind of in a mental health crisis situation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So other things to kind of be aware of, and this is kind of going along of depression symptoms, the client being in a depressed mood where they're upset, they're emotional, crying quite often, eating habits, sleeping habits. Sometimes we don't even think the sleeping patterns, if they're getting too much sleep or getting not enough sleep, that's a huge kind of, red flag that's, hey, like, this client might be in a crisis or is starting to become in a crisis. What else is there? Hopelessness and worthlessness, recurring thoughts of death, things like that we also need to be aware of. So having that open conversation with your kiddo is the best thing right now.
And I know me and Mindy talked before in one of our other sessions about like knowing your kid. Like, you're gonna know if your kid is, if they act like this all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're really gonna look for really those behavior changes. Is this person's behavior changing? Are they acting different? Is this just a normal teenage behavior, or is this person really showing some different signs and symptoms, and are they just acting different? And so you're going to notice probably some stuff. Another thing we talked about is also reaching out to like the school or somebody else, right? And so if I notice something is going on with my kid at home, I would reach out to the school and say, hey, this is something that I've just noticed at home. Have you guys noticed anything that's been concerning at school, right? Because sometimes you don't know exactly always what's happening at school. Maybe the counselor is thinking, oh, it's not a big deal, or maybe it just hasn't even been brought to their attention. And so if you call the counselor and say that, then the counselor can kind of keep an eye out for that stuff and really go and check on that kid, maybe even do like what's it called, an observation, and see if if they're noticing stuff. So that's another thing to kind of also just kind of keep in mind.
I think another symptom that we also want to kind of keep an eye out as parents is loss of interest or pleasure in things. Like, for example, a student who is like really into basketball and is like, wanting to make the team, and all of a sudden doesn't want to do anything with basketball. I think that's a huge red flag that there might be a crisis developing as well. Is definitely loss of interest.
Yeah. One of the things I just want to piggyback, and I know we've said this also in our previous, but I feel like maybe some people are new, is how to determine what's normal teenage behavior and what is something you should be concerned about. And so we always talk to parents about the fact that if you're seeing angry behavior and depressed mood across all domains of their life, school, home, and basketball, for example, that could indicate an issue. But if their basketball coach reports that they're doing great, they're an awesome member of the team, the school sees no issues, and you're just seeing it at home, sometimes that's normal teenage behavior, because we know as parents, our kids save their best behavior for parents.
Mhm.
So, and I always tell parents this, I know that sometimes it's hard and they're mouthy with us or they're whatever, but the truth is they feel comfortable with us. They know we will love them unconditionally. That's why we get the brunt of it. It's a sad but true fact of parenting. And sometimes it is upsetting. But the reality is that's kind of how to think about it. If they seem great and doing really well in areas outside of the home, but crabby at home, that's an indication that might just be normal teenage behavior.
So in regards to talking about crisis, something that we also need to keep in mind is just access to lethal means. What are these things that maybe you do have in your house that could, potentially cause harm to your kid? It says that there was a study that said among youth 17 and under, over a 2-year period over 4 states, it found that 82% use firearms belonging to a family member and usually a parent. A lot of times parents will underestimate the fact that they think that their kids never handled a gun, they've never touched a gun, but when they were asked separately, 22% said that they actually did. And we know that sometimes when we do these studies and stuff, kids are going to underreport things just because they always think, oh, I'm going to get in trouble because there's some type of way that they're going to see this information. So reducing access doesn't always reduce the overall suicide rate, but it can save lives because it reduces the lethal means of it. So, when people take pills versus using a gun, right? You're more likely to survive taking those pills than you are a gun, right? And so it kind of makes it takes away that part of it. And so it's the rate of suicide deaths with firearms has increased almost every year since 2006. 63% of suicides do involve firearms. 90% who use firearms are more likely to die, and 55% of firearm deaths are actually suicides. And so storage is a really, really important thing. When storage was noted, about 2/3 had been stored unlocked. Youth knew the combination, where the key was, or they broke into the cabinet. And so we're gonna know, like, kids are curious, kids are gonna know stuff, so keep those bullets and that gun separate from each other, so that they don't have access to it all, right? And so when a gun is unloaded, when it's stored unloaded, it does lower that risk of suicide. A Houston study was done, and it said 135 survivors of nearly lethal suicide attempts from ages 13 to 34 were asked how much time passed between the time you decided to complete suicide and when you actually attempted. 1/4 deliberated for less than 5 minutes. In Australia, an ER study said that 40% said they took action within less than 5 minutes. So 1/3 under 18 experienced crisis within 24 hours of taking their life. So that moment of crisis is so important to be able for them to not have access to those things, right? Because we know if they're gonna fight with mom, or this happens or that happens, whatever the situation is, if they have access to something, especially something as lethal as a gun, in that moment they're feeling suicidal, they're like, I'm just gonna do it. And especially with boys tend to be a lot more impulsive, and so storage is just a huge part of that, and just making sure that those things are in a safe place, that you're changing the combination regularly, you're moving that key, making sure that they don't have access to that key, and just kind of figuring out what is the best way to really store this gun for me. I know that they have like those safes and stuff like that have like fingerprints on them and stuff like that. And so just kind of looking into how can I reduce this for my child if I decide to have this gun in my house. Because Missouri is the 11th highest suicide rated state in the nation. And so that's kind of pretty high. And so we definitely want to be able to prevent these things from happening. So when we talk about access to these lethal means, it's definitely important to figure out what is that best way to store it, because, statistics do show us that it is really important to figure out the best way to store that thing and make sure that it is safe, to prevent these things from happening. Because like I said, if somebody's using that medicine, those pills versus a gun, they're going to be more likely to survive that, taking that medicine, and we can get in, help that person, and we can really try to figure out what is going on. So Ronnie asked, do you know how many of the 153 expressed regret for trying after their attempt? That was not, they didn't mention anything about that. When I read about the study, they just mentioned that part. But it did talk also about like the amount of people that will, like, if they have survived a suicide attempt, that most of those people, I don't remember the exact number, but most of them are not going to go on to die by suicide. It was kind of like a low number. I don't know if you guys know the statistic or not, but it was kind of like a low number that said we'll actually attempt again after that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know what the exact number is, but when I went to a training a couple weeks ago, they were talking about
the second time. Another thing I want to add to the storage is you can also go to your local police department to get a gun lock, as well as if you do feel like, you can't even have your gun in the home, you don't feel like it's safe, you can lend it to, like a family member or a friend to keep it safe until you feel like you're able to bring that back into the home. I think that's a great thing to kind of add on to kind of access to lethal means as well.
And I know that that was one of the things that talked about storage too, that is a great option to give it to like a family member. Mm-hmm. I know that before I had a client who was suicidal when I worked somewhere else, and they had the police come out to their house, and the police actually took the gun away from them until they were able to get like a doctor's note saying like, from the psychiatrist saying like, yeah, this person's stable, they're good, they should be able to have their gun back and stuff. And so if police are coming into those situations, they might even say, hey, is there a gun in the house? And they themselves might take it, so that that person doesn't have access to that. So when we talk about taking action, you have to kind of figure out, is this immediate danger, right? Is this person, are you feeling like this person's really in danger? Their life's in danger. If they are, call 911 or go to the ER. Don't leave that person alone under any circumstances, even if you feel like, oh, they're not going to do anything. Always go call 911 or go to the ER. We want to make sure that person's safe. And so if there is a high risk, if you feel like I'm not even sure about it, take them to the ER. Let a professional talk to them and figure out what is going on. Let them do that risk assessment and figure out, does this person need to be admitted? Can they go home and we can make a plan, or what is the situation? If they're not in immediate danger, just create that safe space for them to talk to you at home, listen to their feelings. It's okay to ask questions, but just letting them know that you're there and supporting them is really, really huge. A lot of times kids, if they're coming to you and talking to you about this stuff, then that means that obviously they're having trouble and they're trusting in you to really get some support from you. So it's important to be able to kind of keep that space open for them and let them talk. Sometimes as parents, if your kid is coming to you and saying, I'm suicidal, I have a plan, I want to do this, I want to do that, it can be really scary. And so sometimes our responses aren't always the best, but even just letting your kid know that and just you yourself being vulnerable with them will also help them feel supported and know like, hey, this is a really hard thing to deal with, but I'm still here with you. I might not know all the answers to all the questions you're asking me, but at the end of the day, I'm going to help you figure them out, whatever they are. We can call the school counselor, we can call this person to figure out what is the best next step to take, or whatever question it is that they're asking. So just kind of keeping that support there, keeping that communication open, letting them be able to share whatever it is that they are sharing with you. And then number 3 is going to be treatment. So if your child's already receiving some mental health treatment, get in touch with that person. If they're seeing a therapist or a psychiatrist, call that person and say, hey, this happened. This is how my kid's feeling. This is what's going on. And then they can also talk to you about, okay, this is what you should do next. Maybe they say, okay, maybe we need to try a different medication. How about you come in tomorrow and we can get them in and see what's going on. And so call that person if they're already seeing somebody and try to figure out with them, what to do. If they're not receiving any treatment, it's good to be able to figure out how to get that treatment. So you can actually call your primary care doctor, like your child's doctor, your pediatrician. They'll be able to like do some screening sometimes. They'll be able to refer you to some places, and they'll also might be able to get you in sooner. And so sometimes if doctors know like a certain provider that maybe they have a good connection with, they might be able to call that provider and say, hey, I really need this person to come in as soon as possible, and you might be able to get in sooner. There are mental health challenges right now just because there are so many people trying to receive these services. So sometimes you might call and you might get on a wait list and stuff like that. So even just talking to your school counselor, because we might, have programs at the school of somebody that you could talk to as well. So it's really good to kind of just reach out to people. Like I said, your primary, the pediatrician and the school counselor, I think, are huge supports and giving you those referrals, and even just calling people to be able to figure out, what next steps can we take? Because a lot of times I feel like parents don't always know what resources are available at the school. And so they don't know that we have a CHADS person at the school, or they don't know that we have some other organization coming in and meeting with kids and stuff like that. So it is really, really important to be able to figure out, okay, how can I get this treatment? And then for connect with the hotline. So you can call that 988, the new suicide and crisis lifeline. You can call 988. You can call some of the other numbers we're going to share with you at the end, and also talk to them. There's also a crisis text line that you can also text and ask for help as well. And they might be able to give you some tips on what to do, or maybe what to talk about and what questions to even ask if you are worried. And then 5 is going to be safety planning. So just determining your plan of action. If your child's mental health, escalates to an emergency, what do I do? The plan should include calming strategies, ways to distract themselves from feeling the pain that they're having, and how to reach out to support. Sorry guys, got a little crazy.
All right, so we want to talk a little bit about risk assessment. First of all, I want you to know if there should be an issue at school, all school counselors have been trained how to administer a risk assessment. The protocols might look a little bit different from district to district, but they're all basically the same plan, and they are able to determine if your child is at low risk or if they're at high risk. And then there are protocols to follow, like a school counselor, for example, if they feel like a child's at high risk, which includes calling parents, encouraging parents to take their child to the hospital, helping them to navigate where to take them. Sometimes in schools, they'll call ahead. If they send a family to the hospital, they'll call ahead to let them know that they're coming and what's going on and stuff like that. And then if you are in a situation where you're having a conversation with your child as sort of a risk assessment, you want to make it a very conversational. I don't think any of us have a copy of a risk assessment at home, and you don't necessarily need that, but you want to make your tone more conversational with your child to kind of assess where they're at. So you want to assess for the following things: ideation. Are they having suicidal thoughts? Do they have a plan? What are some of the behaviors that you're seeing from them in order to indicate that there is an issue? And then also intent. What is their intent in terms of carrying out their plan, how they're going to do that, all that kind of stuff. So do you want to add, I know
Yeah.
you've done risk assessments before.
Yeah,
Do you wanna
so I'll talk a little bit
Yeah,
about the risk
absolutely.
assessment. We also want to, when we are looking for that risk in a client, we also want to figure out if they have any needs at the house, if it's accessible. I feel like at each of my school, it's a little bit different how they do their risk assessment. For example, like one school that I just did, the client, like the school counselor wanted to do the risk, like do their thorough school, risk assessment, because then after we evaluated the client, we felt like we felt like their risk was really high. So we encouraged the client's parents to take the client to the hospital immediately, which can be scary, which can definitely be scary for the parents. So I think we also have to remember that as clinicians, supporting the parents, because that parent was emotional wreck, for the to least say, and kind of calming that parent down, as well as just the client. The client, I felt like, was more calm and was very open, but you do have to, when, like you said, it's more of a conversation when doing a risk assessment. We're assessing, we do it's called Columbia Suicide Severity Rating Scale. That's what we assess for risk for clients, and we're looking for thoughts, so anything like, I don't want to be here, I just want to die. I even like thoughts of like just saying I want to run away, but actually, not wanting to be here still, as well as any intent like to actually take their own life, as well as anything with a plan where if they're starting it, to having a step-by-step plan, and then looking at if they have any means to, complete that plan. So it is kind of a thorough risk assessment. And like I said, I do feel like each school is a little bit different. I wish every school was kind of the same, so everyone was kind of on the same page, because some of my schools, they want you to do the risk assessment, and then other schools have their own kind of risk assessment to assess how high the levels of the crisis is for the client. And then we'll talk a little bit about safety plan next, but that's the next step. Is sometimes, the client 10 minutes before they leave the session or the session is over, they're telling me that, like, they're having thoughts of wanting to die, but they didn't tell me that when we were doing the brief mood survey, which is that's our assessment that we routinely do every week with the client, which helps clinicians better pinpoint how the client is feeling and doing, and helps us better understand like what's going on. And sometimes clients will be, completely truthful, but then sometimes it comes out later on in the session and you're like, oh no, what do I do next? I don't have time to do a safety plan with a client. So then that's where you would pull in the school counselor or the point of contact, whoever is available at the time, to kind of talk about the next step of like, what do we need to do next? But always, like, if a client is talking about anything about wanting to hurt themselves or even any suicidal thoughts, I always let the school counselors know, because they also need to be in the loop too. I think everyone needs to be on the same page, so no one's kind of, being like, oh, what to do next? Like, I created a safety plan, but I didn't, let the school counselor know. They're going to be like, what's wrong with, they're going to be freaking out, is what I'm going to say. So, so I definitely think a risk assessment is definitely beneficial for a client, and needing to know kind of what's the next step. And then we'll talk about safety planning next, and I'll talk a little bit more about kind of we'll talk about exactly like what it's going to look like when we do a safety plan.
Yeah. So a safety plan is a plan to keep a kid safe, basically. And so you might do this at home with your child. You might develop a safety plan. It should include calming strategies, coping strategies, ways to distract themselves. And if they should need to reach out for support, who can they go to? Is that going to be a parent? Is that going to be an older sibling? Is that going to be a friend? Things like that. I think parents are able to develop safety plans with their kids for home life, but then schools also develop safety plans for children at school. Because we know that, there are some kids who do try to harm themselves within a school building. So it just makes sense to have them in both places. And so the whole reason behind it is, I said, to keep a kid safe and to get support when they're in a crisis. Because sometimes when kids or even adults are in crisis, they can't think about what to do. They need to know what the plan is, or they need to have it written down. When I worked in a school, sometimes kids had a written plan that they had signed and agreed to, that they kept in their backpack. So if they felt like they needed it, they could just pull it out and look at it. On those safety plans, you want to talk about things like writing down what triggers might be, how to avoid triggers. You might have them write down what are reasons for living, what are positive things to look forward to, who can they talk to. We used to have sometimes kids in our school who had safety plans that included trusted teachers, and then we would let those teachers know that that child has chosen them as their go-to safe person. And if that kid showed up their doorstep, they knew that was, that the child was in crisis and needed to be with them. Also, maybe who to go for professional help, and how to feel safe in a situation. The other thing is, you want to make everything easily accessible. So for their safe people, you might want to put those numbers into their phone. What's that called? Speed dial.
Yes.
Like on speed dial, so they can just like press the button and they're ready to go. And also, one of the important things too is have the child be a part of making the plan, and have them even write the plan themselves in their own words, so that they have buy-in to use the plan if necessary, and make sure that they feel comfortable with it. A lot of times, the kids of different ages, it could be younger kids or sometimes even older kids, they feel a lot of times like adults have control. Adults are always in control. And sometimes that is what causes these mental health crises they might be in. And so if they're able to come up with the plan on their own, agree to it, maybe even contribute some ideas, then they can kind of feel like they have some of the control. And then you want the child to agree to the plan that you come up with together. And so making sure that they can confirm that they'll use the plan if necessary. So.
And I like to even add to that, what I like to do when I do create a safety plan with the student is I like to give my clients homework. So one thing is we kind of make it a routine of we need to start checking this daily, and then they also once we have the safety plan created and I send it out to their parents, I tell them to also take a picture of it, because most clients have phones, right. So that's something that they can assess, as well as print it out if they do have a printer, and put it on, the fridge or their bulletin board at home, somewhere in their room where they can access it every day, so they can start to become familiarized with it, and know what to kind of go to. Is it okay if we kind of talk about what a safety plan, sure. And kind of give you examples of what we kind of talked about?
Okay. So there's a question. What about those who don't go to school? My son is 19, working, doesn't have the school system.
Referral. Yeah, referral. You call, you'd call the CHAD's office and refer your son since he is 19. We see adolescents until age 25.
Are you saying,
can I just talk?
Yeah, sure.
So he has attempted suicide. He was in a psychiatric facility for about a week. He's got a psychiatrist, he's got a therapist, but I'm looking for like some of the home stuff, some of the support system outside of that. He doesn't have a guidance counselor to go see. He doesn't have, I'm just thinking about the day-to-day stuff, and he's pretty quiet and to himself. And I say he's a man of few words often because he doesn't talk a lot. I'm just looking for, something, other suggestions. I don't know if you have programs there that like he could attend that are maybe not just therapy, but different groups where there's projects or activities or things like that.
So I think one thing that you can do is you can still make a safety plan with him. I think that would be huge for him because he is 19, he's an adult, right? So I think making a safety plan with him would probably be, good. You have attempted before, like how can we make sure that you're safe, right? Because that's our main goal. And really get him to be involved in it. And figure out what are things he can do that are safe. Who are those people that he can call in those moments?
As well as, I don't know if he's interested in this, but we do have a survivors of suicide support group. They meet bi-weekly in the office, and that might be another option for your son if he was, looking into that and interested.
Is it, do you know what the age mix is, or is it, maybe it's different every week? Or?
I'm not exactly sure on age-wise, but I'm thinking it's 25. I don't really know.
I don't. Yeah, I've never been a part of it, so I don't know.
We could find that out.
Or I can call and find out too.
Yeah. But I think that would be a great opportunity for just a support group, so he can relate to others who have, went through something traumatic.
Yeah, and I think even just like asking for that, if he's not able to come here, maybe they might know if somebody's doing that program, they might know other places maybe that do the same type of thing or something similar that they could refer you to as well.
Are you guys still in Crestwood?
We're in South County, like right by South County Mall.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If you call the office, we can definitely connect you with somebody that can offer some other resources that you might be looking for.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for your question.
Yeah. And if I I have to jump off at 7 for another meeting, but so don't worry. Don't worry if I disappear.
Okay.
All right.
So just some tips that might help to get children through crisis are just kind of being aware of common reactions to crisis. What are those? How do kids normally react to crisis, right? Taking that time to listen, let them say whatever it is that they need to say and let them get it out. Inspire a positive response. I tell kids when I do presentations sometimes, I'm like, you guys think that, talking to an adult might not help. I'm like, but statistics and numbers show that it really actually does. Sometimes when you talk to somebody else, they might be able to see that situation from a different point of view and they might be able to see it differently. So they might be able to give you a different way of looking at it, or they might give you a different way to kind of approach that situation or how to handle that situation and stuff like that. So it's definitely important to be able to talk about it, to figure out, is there something else that we can do? Be prepared to deal with those fears and worries that they might be having. You yourself use healthy coping skills and show your kids, these are things I do when I'm super upset. Maybe it's something we could try together. And even just like doing those healthy coping skills, even when you're not in a crisis, because then that way when they are in a crisis, they can actually do them versus trying to do them in that crisis, because at that point it's super hard to think about, okay, what are my coping skills, right? Even limiting that exposure to social media or news if something is going on. Like even just think about when COVID first started, right? There was all this stuff on the news. It made people really unsure about what was going to happen. It made some people feel super anxious. So kind of limiting some of those things. monitoring that behavior just over time. Is this normal? Has this been going on for a day or two, now they're better? Has this been going on for a week, a month? Encouraging them to write and draw about whatever is happening. I tell kids sometimes, I'm like, I used to, when I was in middle school, I would love to write down whatever it was I was mad about. Just because sometimes when you talk to people, they always want to give you advice, tell you what to do, and sometimes you don't want that or you don't need it. So writing down whatever it is that you're upset about, and then I was like, and then I would just rip it up. I was like, one, I didn't want anybody to see what I was upset about. And number two, I felt like when I would rip up that paper, it kind of had really helped me calm down and de-stress about that situation and not feel as upset about it. And then I could kind of think about, okay, what do I do next? Create that sense of safety, make sure that they do feel safe at home. Even though we might get that attitude and those behaviors, still letting them know that, hey, you are safe at home. You're in a good spot. We love you, those kind of things. Remember to just play or spend time together. I think that's really important. I think it can be hard, especially with our older kids. They want to hang out with friends. They want to do this. They want to do that. So just encouraging, family movie night here and there, dinners every night or whatever, just doing something together. Even a lot of people say that car rides are good. Because in those car rides, right, you guys are stuck in the car together. You kind of have to talk, right? And so maybe those are the times where, hey, we're not going to do phones or headphones. We're going to talk when we're in the car together, driving to practice or driving here. That's going to be our time together that we're going to talk about our day and check in with each other. So just kind of figuring out what that looks like for you and your family. Any other tips?
Another tip that I just want to kind of add is just when a client is in crisis, and we have to create a safety plan. One thing is just checking in, like making it a routine of checking in with your child every single day, having that open conversation with the child and letting them know that you're listening and having an opening ear. Because sometimes kids don't feel like they're heard, and that's usually what I'm hearing is the parents aren't truly listening to their children and they don't feel heard. So just letting them know that you are listening to them, and reiterating that and summarizing kind of what they're needing.
And if you don't know the answer, like I said earlier, tell them like, hey, I don't know the answer, but we'll figure it out together. And so our next slide is just talking about student reentry. So what does that look like if your child does go to the hospital and now they're coming back to school, and what that looks like?
Yep. So when that happens with the child and they come back to school, the school will want to develop a safety plan with them. That will include a network of support for the student, whether that be the counselor, whether that be the teacher, the social worker, the nurse, whoever they feel comfortable with. And also just the school has been trained to just show empathy and understanding for the situation. Sometimes when I used to work in a school, kids were so stressed when they came back about the expectation of making up homework.
Yes.
But working with teachers to say, hey, seriously, this kid doesn't not need to do 25 math problems. Like, can they show you they know how to do this in 5? Just so that they don't feel overwhelmed. The worst thing that we can do for these kids coming back is to stress them out and make them feel overwhelmed. And you want to, it's that under number 2, it says flexibility surrounding triggers and stressors. A lot of times school was the stressor. So we got to work really hard to figure out how to make that less stressful. But it could also be social situations. So we want to really help work with the student to figure out what their triggers and stressors are and try to reduce those or avoid those as much as possible. We talked about reducing academic expectations. And then the other thing is notifying other personnel. This isn't a gossiping situation. We're not talking about what happened to Johnny, whatever, but letting the appropriate people who have contact with the child know with a limited amount of explanation what has been happening, just so that they can be aware and be able to support the child through coming back to school. Sometimes kids are going to ask questions. We want to try to let personnel know how to address those in a situation, because sometimes kids don't have the best social skills and they might like yell out like, "Hey dude, where you been for the past 3 weeks?" You know, so we want to just help teachers to be able to navigate those situations on behalf of the student to make it the most comfortable that they can. The other thing is a lot of schools will develop a plan for the child to meet with the counselor daily, as needed, depending on what the situation is. So that the there is a plan of support as well as a safety plan. So those are things that happen when a kid will return.
And these are just some resources for you guys. And you guys have St. Louis County Youth Connections, Kids Under 21, Behavioral Health Response, the Crisis Text Line, Crisis, Life Crisis Hotline, Behavioral Health Urgent, CHADS, the 988 line. If you are calling 911, like we said, for those emergency situations, you can ask for a CTI trained officer. That's going to be an officer who is more trained to deal with like mental health issues. And so you can ask for that. Some places will have it, some places won't. It kind of just depends on if they have that person available or not. And so also Mercy Hospital, there's the Crisis Text Line, Drain, Metro Trains Umbrella Group, and the Trevor Project. Does anybody have any questions? Anything you guys want to talk about?
Do we want to talk about post-pension just quickly?
Oh, sure.
Okay. I'm just going to talk a little bit about post-pension. If a child.
Also, if you need to leave at 7, you can leave at 7. It's okay.
You won't hurt our feelings.
Yeah.
I just want to talk about some options after post-pension that the Family Support offers for students in crisis. We have in-school support groups as well as crisis counseling, individually, just one-on-one. We also have family support counseling one-on-one in the office, and then like we were talking about, the survivors of the suicide support groups that are also in the office. This is a bi-weekly group who meets. It kind of just depends. They meet in the office, but sometimes online too. So you have an option of what you would like. So I did want to talk a little bit about that too, that we have that option after a crisis.
Okay. Anybody have any questions?
Also, just to let you know, I checked with our program director who's on his CHADS Coalition that everybody who signed up will get a recording of this session in case you want to go back and look at something, but it also will have the slides so that you will see all those different resources if you should need to, when you look at it, take a screenshot of it so you can have those.
And next month, we're going to be talking about coping with holiday sadness. So that's going to be our December topic for the month. So hopefully you guys can join us next month also for our next all-in conversations. And like I said, if you guys have questions, let us know. If questions come up after today, you guys can always email us and just let us know what your question is, and we will get you whatever information we can. If you're questioning referrals and you don't know where to go, you can always call CHADS and ask us about that stuff too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ronnie, did you have a question?
Oh, you're muted.
I just quickly wanted to ask that for adults and children alike, the plan the plan that you develop with your child in crisis. Obviously they found that effective, but how, because they do this with adults as well, I believe, but how effective has it been? Do you find that kids really seriously look at these and I know it's made an impact, but has it like changed the trajectory of children by being able to make these plans with somebody else? What will I do in this instant? Who will I go to? And, things like that.
So I think that from like kind of what we talked about when we were talking about access to lethal means and stuff like that, we talked about, being in that crisis. And a lot of people, when they're in that crisis, they're not thinking clearly. And they're like, this is what I'm going to do. Right. So when they have that safety plan and they know like, oh, this is right here for me to look at, and I can look at this and know what to do. It is going to help them.
For children also. I mean, I'm just surprised to hear that they're so, that in those moments they are, because with adults, oftentimes they'll say, put a note or a picture or something around that firearm, something that will make you stop and take a few moments to take notice of what you're about to do. But I think I'm just really impressed that children, are, once they're given the agency, that it more often is extremely helpful. And I'm like excited to hear that is actually a skill that can be put into something that they have found has really, really benefited of all age groups.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I mean, kids are impulsive. So that's why it's always good.
That's why I'm asking.
Practice that stuff when they're not in crisis, right? So then when they are in crisis, they know what to do. So even when we talk about those healthy coping skills, like practice that stuff ahead of time so that when they are in those things, like they know what to do. They know, oh, this is going to help me calm down. What have you seen kind of from students and stuff?
I mean, I just also want to kind of let you guys know that a suicidal episode for a child or an adolescent, it's impulsive, but it's intense, but it's also short-lived. It's only a couple seconds or a couple minutes, and then they snap back. So when they have that plan, they're able to stop and look at, and that's why I like to make it homework, because then they are familiar of, I can go to this and I can try to keep myself safe instead of, being just impulsive. Is why I think the safety plans are so
helpful.
And especially making them a part of it. Like it's not just you or somebody else telling them what to do. Like they're saying, okay, this is what I think is going to help me. You know what I mean? You can always give suggestions and stuff, and they might say, no, that I wouldn't really do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, good question. Thank you for asking.
Anybody else?
All right, Jen or Judith, you guys, or Aricia, you guys have any questions? You guys good?
No, it's very helpful though. Thank you. It's very, I like the practical application, the planning.
And if you guys want, I can also like send just kind of like an outline of a safety plan to Mindy or Aida, and we could send that out too, so you can see what it kind of looks like. I think that would be helpful when you actually can like physically see it.
Yeah, you're right. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you guys. Thank you guys so much for coming on tonight. Like I said, next month we're doing the coping with holiday sadness. So join us next month as well, hopefully. And if you guys have questions afterwards, please don't hesitate to email us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Guys,
Really good.
have a good night.
Bye.
Thank you.